biggest CEO earners today in America. Top 3 are Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella, $42.9 million salary. Number 2 is wait a minute. So let me see. Top 3. Okay, that's the one Microsoft. Number 2 is Robert Swan of Intel, $66.9 million at number 2. And a big shock, number 1, the CEO of Google, parent company Alphabet, Sundar Pichai, whose compensation is a fiscal 2019 total of $280,600,000. That's his salary. Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg, $23.4 million, made only 94 times more than his employees, but that's the lowest of all CEOs listed. Most on the list earn several hundred times more than their workers. So when you hear these numbers, what do you think about?
Well, I think you got to just draw a line in the sand and say, all right, man, if we are capitalists and we believe in that type of business and economy, then we got to root for them. That means they did something right. That means they had a great year. It's touchy. I think I look at it simply this. It's a scoreboard. It's a fun little thing to look at the end of the year. It's so far off in the stratosphere for most people. There's nothing you can do about it. It's just mind-boggling to think of some of these numbers. And how about the guy? You got to give Sunday, however you pronounce his name, the head of Alphabet, credit for staying under the radar screen. The guy's never in the news. You never hear about him. Very, very, very in the background. And that's a hefty compensation. But you also have to read between the lines a little bit. And that's not their salary. I mean, they're cashing in stock, and it's bonuses, and it's incentives. So, more power to them.
Yeah, I think when you break it down, I think the media likes to talk about these big numbers. Oh my gosh, it makes so much more. But a lot of it is stock compensation. And if the company didn't go up, why aren't any airline CEOs on there? I'd be willing to bet there's 1 or 2 airline CEOs that have a higher cash-based salary with medical benefits, a bunch of perks, than some of these guys listed. But they didn't have the stock-based compensation that went with it, that drove it up. And so, I think it's a bit of a vanity stat, but it is to the victor in terms of building enterprise value. And that's what these guys are paid to do.
Tom, today, I think it's fair to say one of the biggest criticisms that CEOs get, like yesterday, a guy sends me a message saying, it's unfair that Zuckerberg is making this much more times than his employees are, and these CEOs are making 100 times more than their employees are, et cetera, right? So we're bashing these guys that are making money. So here's the question. If I'm a kid, okay, we're in college. If we're in college and we're partying together and we're going out there, we're having a drink or whatever we're doing. Okay, we're going, obviously something you never did because I know you were very conservative. But so yeah, exactly, a different type of partying, which I'm willing to bet Tom knows more about weed than anybody in this room combined. I am willing to bet Tom knows more about weed than anybody. He can do a clinic. You can do a case study on it. But let me go back to my question here. When we're in college, when we're in high school, when you're hanging out with your buddies, what do you dream about? What do you sit there and say? You say, one day I want to be what? Hey, Johnny, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to do? And what do we talk about?
Being rich.
Yeah, you want to be what?
I want to be like Mike.
I want to be like Mike was one of them, right? I want to be like Mike. Okay, who do you want to be? Who did you want to be when you were in high school? If we're in 11th grade with you, Kyle, what was your dream? What would you say? What was yours, Sam? What was yours? Maybe Sam from Colombia said, I want to be like Pablo when I grow up. I don't know. What's your dream, Paul? You said you wanted to be who? Is it Arnold?
Yes, of course.
You wanted to be Arnold, the greatest bodybuilder of all time. Sam, what was yours? You wanted to be what?
Top CEO of a company.
Top CEO of a company. Okay, was that really yours? Is that really yours? What's yours?
I wanted to be the next Denzel Washington.
You wanted to be the next Denzel Washington. What was yours? If we're in high school.
I was going to take that little fool down. Yes.
Seriously,
yes.
was
Bob
it?
Costas.
Honestly,
yes.
Freaking awesome.
Yeah.
What was yours?
When I was in high school,
we're in high school. We're in high school. We're at lunch. We're having grilled cheese. Whatever pizza we're having, whatever good food they give to high school kids. Who's Tom want to be?
I had read about the birth of Microsoft, and I wanted somehow to be part of a tech company.
Okay, freaking! Do you realize we all dreamt about one day being somebody important,
right?
And now I am so confused when the media says these guys are getting overpaid. There's an element of me as a kid that wants to think about somebody getting overpaid. There's an element of a kid dreaming about saying, I want to see one guy score more points than everybody else. Like, can you imagine this question? Would you like to see somebody beat the Will Chamberlain record of 100 points? Would you like to see
Yes, I would.
Would
Yes.
you want to
Yes.
Would you want to see somebody beat the 74 home run record with Barry Bonds without steroids? A 220-pound skinny guy doing 75 home runs. Would you like to see
Yes,
that?
yes.
Would you like to see Joe DiMaggio's 56-game hit streak being broken? Would you like to see somebody, win 5 World Series in a row and maybe it's never been done before? Would you like to see somebody get 7 rings and someone win 4-peat, not 3-peat? We want to see these records being taken place. I don't understand the logic behind saying this is too much money they're making because it's not good for society to have somebody make this much more money. Well, why don't you, since you feel you can do better, why don't you go create a website that has 3 billion users? If you do that, we'll pay you handsomely. Why don't you go become so good at what you do where you become the CEO of the #1 search engine in the world? You go do it. If you can do that, props to you. Maybe you deserve $400 million compensation. Why are we so much about criticizing people who win at the highest level in America? I'm so confused. Why?
Maybe one of the reasons is some of these people are unlikable and they're tech companies and they're hard to root for. So that could be one small reason. But the media just in general, that's their mentality.
Yeah.
They always want to root against the big guy. They want safe. They want, these aren't big thinkers we're talking about in media that are writing these stories. So, it's always that us versus them mentality.
Okay, the real me, I will tell you something, and I wasn't being safe. I was being honest what I said. If you take a look at what some of these CEOs make, just the cash compensation, there's a lot of alignment across industries. But the airlines didn't go up, and so the stock didn't go up, and so they didn't make all the extra money, so they're not on the hit list of overpaid leader punks that everybody wants to call them out to be. But I got to say this. I am glad that Mark Zuckerberg made what he made, because it meant the value of that company was increased, number one. And number two, he made a hell of a lot of jobs. You may not like what all those jobs are doing in terms of censoring and things like that, but he made a bunch of jobs. I am glad that Google is made, that guy, Sundar made the money, because it means that Google is still expanding and there's jobs that are being created. I see that side of it from an entrepreneurial lens. And I tell people, really, well, let me tell you, a world without billionaires means we all eat ramen noodles. Do you really want that? Do you want that?
No, nobody wants that.
And so that's how I feel about that. It's like, it's easy to be envious of the other guy when some people are a little too critical or a little too lazy or a little too envious or a little too jealous. It's easy to be critical. But then you got to step back and look at it. And, for every Google you talk about, you remember the auto industry and it decimated Flint, Michigan, because they got out-competed against, and then it went down. And now look at Flint. Yeah, but you know what? People had jobs in Flint, and Flint was built, and the world changed, and the Rust Belt and U.S. Steel went, and these are cycles, and they hurt, and they're bad, and people talk about them like that. But you're just criticizing the people at the beginning when the jobs are created.
You know who makes this mistake the most, and they don't even know how costly the mistake is? You know who makes this mistake the most, and it's so costly? Parents. Parents make the mistake. Imagine this kid's dream is to one day be a Sunday. Imagine this kid's dream is to one day be a CEO of, a Facebook. Imagine this guy, and the mom says, these rich people, let me tell you, these rich people. And the kid says, Mom, I kind of wanted to do it to impress you. Now, Mom made no incentive for this kid to do that. And long term, he could have been the winning ticket for the entire family. But the parent killed the kid's dream. Let the kid dream on what he wants to do. I think that's who ends up paying the biggest price. And they don't even know. I interviewed the whole No More Mr. Nice Guy, the book. Did you ever end up getting it or not?
I bought it.
Did you read it or not yet?
I felt he was talking to me for a while.
Did you read it?
No, I did.
What'd you think?
It started off with a bang.
Yeah.
There's no question. I'd say the first 80 pages, outstanding. Got a little clinical in the middle. Maybe he ran out of things to say. Picked up at the end. So I thought it was a very good book.
So what'd you think? Was it a good book?
No, I think it was.
Did it give you some perspective you didn't think about before?
No, I literally, the guy with his background and with everything he's observed.
Did he kind of talk to you a little bit?
Well, I mean, I think anybody can look at that book and say there might be a little bit about me in there.
I agree. So I interviewed the guy last week. Yeah. Okay, he reached out. My booker, Alan, who's ridiculous. He listens to everything we do, and he just kind of reaches out to people. He says, "Yeah, I got the guy. Let's do the interview." So we do the interview. Okay, while we're doing the interview, I said, so, tell me about, how big of a role, we talk about real interesting stuff. I said, how big of a role does the first time you ever have sex have to do with us for the rest of our lives? He says, everything. I said, so that means we're all screwed. He says, yes, your first sexual experience ruins your life. I said, okay. So we went through all these other
Especially if
things.
you were alone at the time.
Well, he said, that's okay. We talked about that as well, by the way. I know what you're saying about that. We talked about that as well. But, one of the things, I said, so what do you say about parenting? He says, here's the thing with parenting. Just make sure you're going to screw your kids up. Just make sure it's not too much, okay? What interesting feedback. You're going to screw your kids up. Yeah. Just don't do it too much, because if you do too much, these kids are going to be grown up, worried about walking on eggshells, this, eggshells, that, eggshell, this. I think when you see something like this, I wonder what kids are talking about with their parents at their house. If you're sitting at the dinner table and mom says, rich people are bad, dad says, rich people are greedy, these people, that kid is kind of like, so maybe the best guy that could have ran a great company, been a great CEO, done a thing better than Elon Musk or any of these guys did, maybe that nurturing, maybe that challenging, that pushing, maybe that wasn't there. I don't know.
Well, plus,
maybe I'm fully off.
If you have the drive to do that, you're probably going to overcome some of those negative impulses you're getting from their parents or whatnot. But, you mentioned, your interview with the guy that wrote Mr. Nice Guy, talking about your first sexual experience. I was listening to a different podcast, Victory, the podcast, which is about Entourage, all the guys from Entourage. So if you like Entourage, it's a great podcast with Doug Ellen. And they had James Caan on the show because Scott Caan used to be on Entourage, right? The actor.
Yes.
So James Caan was on there talking about, and man, have times changed, but when Scott Caan turned 16, James Caan got him a suite at the Four Seasons and brought in a couple of Heidi Fleiss's girls. Hey, you're 16 now. So can you imagine his first sexual experience is with a couple of Heidi Fleiss's girls?
You know what Charlie Sheen's was? Charlie Sheen used his dad's credit card to get a couple prostitutes. That's what Charlie Sheen did. And his dad's like, what's this money? He says, I got a couple prostitutes. He got caught. Yeah. Can you imagine, everybody has a different story with their first experience. But he said it has such a big impact of who you become. So again, half the battle is, by the way, I can't wait for people to see that interview because it was very, very different. Yeah. The things we talked about is very different on what shapes boys to become men, and some men still have their old boy tendencies. So if you enjoyed this little short segment from the podcast that we did, here's another short segment to watch. Or if you want to see the entire podcast, click over here. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.